If someone took your car keys the moment you arrived at a party, would you think that was strange? I didn't. It was the start of spring break. My girlfriend Anna, her friend Lena, and Lena's boyfriend Colby and I had driven out to a massive lake house deep in the Ozarks. The place looked like something straight out of a movie. But something felt off from the very beginning. At the front door, the host smiled and held out his hand to Colby. "House safety rule," he said. "I need your car keys." Colby shrugged and handed them over. That's when I noticed a large bowl sitting on a nearby table. It was already filled with dozens of keys. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I had no idea that the next 48 hours were about to change our lives forever. The moment I stepped inside, I realized this wasn't a normal party. The lake house was packed with people. Every room was filled with laughter, music, and alcohol. But something felt off. Almost nobody seemed to know anyone else. Lena kept trying to call the friend who had invited her, but every call went straight to voicemail. "She's probably still on her way," Hannah said. I let it go. As the night went on, though, I couldn't stop watching the host. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't dancing. He wasn't even talking to many people. He was just standing there, watching everyone, and writing notes on a clipboard. Then I noticed something. He glanced in our direction, checked off a name on his list, and smiled, like he'd been waiting for us to show up. I was the first one awake the next morning. My head felt a little heavy, so I headed downstairs to the kitchen to make some coffee. The entire lake house was unusually quiet. That's when I spotted the host near the dining area. He was standing there alone, the same clipboard open in front of him. I glanced at it without really thinking, and my heart nearly stopped. The page was filled with names. Each name had a different mark beside it. Some had green check marks, others had red circles. And next to the 4 of our names, there were no marks at all. Just then, he looked up. Our eyes met. Then, without saying a word, he slowly picked up his pen and drew a red. My mouth went dry. I immediately looked away and pretended I hadn't seen anything. A few seconds later, I glanced back. He was gone. The clipboard was gone too. I hurried upstairs and told Anna everything. She laughed. "You always overthink things," she said. Maybe she was right. But by that afternoon, something else happened that felt even stranger. One of the guys from the party, the same guy I'd seen playing pool the night before, had suddenly disappeared. I asked around about him. His friend said he had left early that morning. There was only one problem. His car keys were still sitting in the bowl downstairs. And his car was still parked outside. For the first time, I started wondering if anyone had actually left the lake house at all.
My uneasiness was turning into real fear. If that guy had left, then why was his car still here? I walked over to the parking area and checked his vehicle. At first, everything looked normal, until I noticed his bag sitting on the back seat. His passport, his clothes, his laptop, everything was still inside. Nobody leaves all of their belongings behind like that. I turned back toward the house when something caught my eye. The old boathouse by the lake. The host was standing there, and with him were the same 8 or 10 people who would seem to know each other from the very beginning. They were all staring at me. Then, suddenly, the host looked down at his watch and slowly nodded, as if the next phase of some plan was about to
hurried back inside and told Colby everything. This time, even he looked concerned. We decided to leave quietly, without telling anyone. But when we reached the bowl of car keys in the foyer, our keys weren't there. And it wasn't just ours. At least half of the keys were gone. My heart started pounding. Just then, Lena came running downstairs. Her face had gone completely pale. "I finally got hold of my friend," she said, her voice trembling. "But she said she never invited us here." The room fell silent, because in that moment, we all realized the truth. Someone had deliberately brought us here, and whoever it was had never intended for us to.
My hands had gone cold. If Lena's friend didn't invite us, then who did? I asked. With trembling fingers, Lena held out her phone. A message from her friend was open on the screen. "I never sent you any link. I didn't even know about this trip." The ground seemed to drop out from under me. Then, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the second floor. The entire house fell silent. We ran upstairs. A girl was standing in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. Her boyfriend was gone. His phone was the only thing left behind on the bed. And on the screen, a new message was glowing. "Don't try to leave the house. We're watching all of you." Beneath the message was a photograph. A picture of us, taken only a few minutes earlier. None of us had seen anyone taking it, which meant one thing. Whoever was watching us was much closer than we
Chill
thought.
ran down my spine. That photo had been taken just minutes ago, which meant someone was still watching us. Panic spread through the room. Some people started crying. Others began shouting. I immediately pulled out my phone and tried to call the police. No signal. Colby tried too. Nothing. No one in the house had any service. Then, bang! A loud crash echoed from downstairs. We rushed to the foyer. The front door was shut. Not just locked, it had been secured from the outside with heavy chains and padlocks. And then, all at once, every light in the house went out. Darkness swallowed everything. A moment later, a speaker crackled to life. A cold voice echoed through the house. "Welcome." A long pause followed. Then the voice spoke again. "The real spring break begins now." And somewhere in the darkness, someone started
Several
laughing.
people screamed in the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my own breathing. Then the cold voice echoed through the speaker again. "You're all here for a reason." A second later, the lights flickered back on. But something had changed. The host was gone. And so were the same 8 or 10 people who had seemed different from everyone else. Then Anna pointed toward the window, her hand shaking. Out by the lake, near the boathouse, they were all standing there. Each of them was holding a flashlight. And kneeling in front of them was the same guy who had disappeared that morning. A wave of dread washed over me. Then one of them stepped forward and tied a black blindfold over his eyes. Without a word, they lifted him to his feet and led him into the darkness of the boat. The door slowly closed behind them, and the guy never came back out. The entire room was frozen with fear. No one said a word. But I knew one thing. If we just sat there and waited,
Any one of us could be next. I motioned to Colby and 2 other guys. We need to get to the boathouse. Somehow, the lock on a service door at the back of the house had been broken. Quietly, we slipped outside and made our way along the edge of the lake. The boathouse door was slightly open. I carefully peeked inside, and my breath caught in my throat. Hundreds of photographs covered the walls. Every picture showed a different spring break group from years past. Some faces had green marks drawn over them. Others had large red X's. The room felt like a record of something terrible. Then I noticed something even worse. The most recent photo had been taken just the night before. It was a picture of all of us standing in front of the lake house. And next to each of our faces, someone had already started.
My hands began to tremble. I slowly moved closer to the photographs. Each one had a year written beneath it. 2018, 2019, 2020. Dozens of groups, hundreds of faces, and many of them had the same red X marked across them. In the center of the room stood a large table. Several thick files were stacked on top of it. I opened one. My stomach dropped. Inside were files on us. Our photos, our social media accounts, our colleges, the names of our friends, even details about our daily routines. Someone hadn't been tracking us for months. They had probably been tracking us for years. Then, bang! A loud slam echoed behind us. We spun around. The boathouse door was shut. Standing in front of it was the host. But this time, he wasn't holding a clipboard. He was holding a gun. The smile on his face was gone. For the first time, he looked completely serious. And suddenly, every red X on those photographs made terrifying
The moment
sense.
we saw the gun, we froze. The host began walking slowly toward us. There was no smile on his face anymore. "You people always make the same mistake," he said, trying to learn the truth. He tossed one of the files onto the table in front of me. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It didn't just contain information about us. It contained reports on every group that had come here over the years. Next to some names was a single word: survived. And next to others, removed. Then suddenly, a voice shouted from outside, "The police! Don't move!" A boathouse window exploded inward. Glass scattered across the floor. It turned out that on the first day, Lena had shared her live location with a friend. When hours passed without hearing from her, the friend became concerned and contacted the police. The host panicked and tried to run. But this time, he didn't get away. What the police discovered afterward was even more disturbing. This had never been a party. It was part of a secret human behavior experiment that had been operating for years. People were lured to isolated locations through fake invitations, then observed while their fear, trust, and decision-making were recorded.
But the most terrifying discovery was still waiting inside the boathouse. The last file recovered was unfinished. On the cover, only one word was written: next. I slowly opened it, and my stomach dropped. Inside was a photograph of me. The end. If you enjoy suspense, thriller, and horror stories like this, be sure to subscribe, because in the next story, the name inside the next file might be yours.
If you enjoyed this terrifying journey, subscribe to Mr. Nightmare 2.0 and become part of our growing horror community. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.